Hello, everyone. Welcome to Zen and Fanfics. Today we are featuring What If Deku was Elemental Kitsune Syrinx? The story is written by TazzDavies on Wattpad. Before we start, please like and subscribe for more content. Now let's dive into the story. How it all started. Night had long since descended over the appealing country of Japan. Stars blazed in the velvet sky, silhouetted by a voluptuous full moon. Nothing but silence could be heard. It would have been tranquil, if not for the reason of why this hero team were here. Standing not too far from a collection of supposedly abandoned warehouses on the outskirts of their town, they'd been given a tip-off by an insider that the LOV, or as we're more to know them as, League of Villains, were experimenting on small children and giving them extra quirks, regardless of the consequences. Shota Aizawa, or Eraserhead, the underground hero, was on edge. He was itching to go inside and rescue those poor children. How they hadn't been tipped off already, he didn't know, and he was livid. How anyone could experiment on children, or anyone for that matter, was beyond him. The world was full of harsh, violent individuals. They had already done a secret raid a few months back on yet another facility, and that was where those with him had become surprised. Because that was where Aizawa had become a dad. He'd secretly adopted one of the small girls that had been part of the rescue. She was nearly 5, but so DMN headstrong it was crazy. She might only be a child, but she was truly smart. He was proud of her already. They got on perfectly. Snapping out of his thoughts, he realized that Nizu had joined them of where he was standing near Hisashi Yamada and Namuri Kiyama, his best friends, as well as All Might, Endeavor, and others. "Do we have a plan?" Nizu asked, drawing attention to himself. "Kick the door in and capture anyone that is there." Endeavor replied, "Sure, and your plans always work so well." Aizawa snapped. He had little patience when it came to the flaming Todoroki. Their dislike of each other was well known. "Then what do you suggest?" Endeavor sneered at him. Aizawa looked around, and everyone was waiting to hear what he had to say. "Silent approach. Let me bring in my secret weapon." "What secret weapon?" All Might asked. Aizawa didn't reply, just took his phone out and fired off a text message. A minute later, they watched as a sly smirk appeared on his face as he turned away from them. They followed his line of sight and stared, wide-eyed, as a small being approached, seemingly out of nowhere. They were wrapped in a black bodysuit with boots buckled up around their calves. Gloves covered tiny hands. A thick black hat covered their head, topped off by earphones. A black mask covered the lower part of their face and neck. All that could be seen was a STRP of their pale flesh, either side of literal cold eyes that seemed to stare into their very souls. They were flame orange in color, split pupils like a cat's, and framed by long lashes that just made them appear much colder than they already were. Who was this? Bounced through their brains. The small being stopped next to Aizawa, and he peered down at them. The coldness left their gaze as they literally stared with hearts in their eyes at the male. He picked them up, and the little being wrapped an arm around his neck to hold themselves in place. He smirked a little. "This is my secret weapon. None of you, bearing Nizu, Namuri, and Hisashi, have met them. This is Pyro," he proudly announced, and they turned to them, eyes freezing over again as they stared, unblinking. All Might had honestly never internally panicked like this before. Who were they? Who the hell was Pyro? What was his power he could sense? They watched as Aizawa put them down, and they stood next to and slung their arm around Nizu's shoulders. It was comical to see they were near enough the same height. "Plan." They blinked to hearing a child's voice. It was soft and calm, which was completely different to their appearance. Well, Endeavor wanted to boot the door in and go in that way, his usual approach. Instead, "Pyro, we need for you to go and scout for us. There are children who are being experimented on illegally." Midnight replied before Nizu could. "First, who the hell are you? And what makes you so sure that you can get in and out without being detected?" Endeavor growled. "For a start, don't raise your voice to Pyro. And second, Pyro is already the best at what they do." Aizawa snapped, glaring at the no-to hero. He felt a tug on his trousers and glanced down. Pyro stared at him silently. He nodded. Pyro didn't pay attention to anyone, just pulled a small pair of goggles out of their pocket and put them on. They tinted over to appear black. I won't do anything. Be back soon. Before anyone could reply, they strode off, quickly blending in perfectly with the surrounding shadows. Be careful, he whispered under his breath. He wouldn't know what to do with himself if anything happened to them. Who do you think you are to tell me to talk to anyone? Endeavor snapped, drawing Aizawa's attention from where he'd been staring after Pyro, someone you really don't want to with. One single mark on me, Endeavor, will literally be the last thing you ever do. He snarled before he was moved away by Namiri and Hizashi. It wasn't Eraserhead they had to worry about. It was Pyro. They were very protective of the underground hero. Some had already learned the hard way. They might be young, but the power they wielded was already something to be cautious of. Everyone needs to calm down. We will wait to hear back from Pyro, and then we'll go from there. Nizu said, easily taking over, which wasn't surprising. He was ridiculously smart, and they had tremendous respect for him. 10 minutes later, as they waited in silence, Aizawa caught sight of something moving in the shadows, and that was only because he had been looking in that direction in the first place. Then whatever it was moved again, and the moonlight hit them. He realized that it was Pyro. Pyro is here, he said, and they all snapped to attention. Waiting had been a toll for them. They had wanted to get in and destroy that place as quickly as possible to not put those children through anything else. Pyro stopped next to him. Anger rolled off them in waves, making them all gulp. What did you find? Namiri asked cautiously. 5 scientists. 99 kids in cages, all dead. One is, however, alive. There's Subject 1. Says on the door. Only way in is through the door, which holds dents and scratches. Lots of books with names on from Subject 1 to 100. Pyro said with fists clenched tightly at their sides. Is there a place to get in so that we can get them? Aizawa asked. Yes, I'll show you. Be quiet. They followed Pyro, who led them down the side of the building. They could hardly see anything, though. Where is it? Nizu whispered. Here. Pyro stopped at a door that was pretty much concealed by the shadows. But Aizawa trusted Pyro completely. He stepped forward and opened it up. They followed each other inside, Pyro taking the lead again. No one questioned anything. They approached a huge room, and the smell that struck their noses was enough to make them GG. Pyro rolled their eyes before motioning for them to follow, before suddenly stopping, and everyone froze in their tracks. Endeavor, put your flames out, Pyro said in a harsh whisper. No, he snapped back. Fine, then don't blame me for this. Pyro turned that cold gaze to him, and before anyone could say or do anything, his flames winked out, plunging them into darkness bar moonlight that filtered in through the broken top windows. Aizawa felt a small tug, and looking down, seeing nothing. He bent over, and Pyro's small hand touched his face. 5 on other side of the door ahead of you. Only one is a quirk, which is immobilization. He's the biggest of them all. Black hair and dirty brown eyes. Got it. Tell the others. He was released and stood up as Pyro replayed it to everyone else, using another of their quirks, telepathy. He felt another tap to his leg, but this was urging him to move forward. They burst through the door and quickly took over everything. The one with the quirk, exactly as Pyro had described them, was blindfolded and a cloth was shoved into their mouth, followed by quirk-canceling cuffs courtesy of Hizashi. Once they'd taken complete control, Endeavor's flames came back, startling the man, and Aizawa would have laughed if it hadn't been such a nasty situation that they were in. The pros began to hunt around, and he heard a curse ring out. Following that, he found All Might, Midnight, Hizashi, and Nizu in a side room that held stacked cages of child corpses. Looking past them, he saw a steel box at the back of the room. Pyro appeared at his side and walked towards it. Is this the one you were talking about? Midnight queried, catching sight of the container. Yes. Pyro stopped in front of it, and they saw thick chains looped over the front, clearly keeping something inside. But what was it exactly? Something highly dangerous by the way those chains were placed. Pyro removed one of their gloves, and their hand changed. It turned bright red, and they put it on the shackles, melting the steel away with no effort. Once done, Pyro put the glove back on, shoved the melted steel out of the way, and pretty much ripped the door open. Midnight took over, gently moving Pyro to the side with a nod. She bent over and crept inside before crying out in anguish. Aizawa moved closer to see what it was and gasped himself. Chained to the wall was a small boy. He was covered in filth as well as old BLD, judging by the color, and his hair was a jet black from grime. He was also very skinny, no doubt from malnutrition and dehydration. PPP please don't hurt me. I be quiet. He cried out in a very timid voice. Dull green eyes held nothing but fear as he glanced at them, before looking straight back down at the floor. No tears appeared, though. What the hell had happened to him? We're not here to harm you. We're saving you. We're heroes, Midnight replied, keeping her voice calm and inviting. Hands splayed out in front of her to show she meant to no harm. Knew help WW would CC come. And never gave up, hope. He whispered, Pyro, get these shackles off him, please. Aizawa asked, and Pyro stepped forward with a nod. The boy tried to shrink back in fear, but Pyro just nudged Midnight out of the way. Midnight, come here, Aizawa said, and the woman did. They left the dank box, leaving Pyro to work their magic. They soon heard the chains fall to the floor, followed by a small cry. Pyro then appeared, holding the small boy at their side. Without a look to anyone, Pyro took the child out of the room, and they followed. Walking past Pros, they stayed silent as they went outside, and over to the ambulance they had on standby. Pyro took the boy inside, but he shrieked in fear and literally clung to Pyro like an extra limb. Aizawa sat down on the edge of the vehicle, observing Pyro as they checked the boy over, refusing to let the paramedics near the highly traumatized kid. Aizawa felt a surge of pride swell up inside of him, but he didn't show anything on the outside. Everyone rejoined them, along with Nizu, who was talking to the police chief. They observed what was happening with Pyro. What did you find? Aizawa questioned. Nizu sighed before answering. Just the bodies, as well as highly detailed books of what they've been doing. Those horrendous people have been taken to jail. We just need to destroy everything now so that nothing is left behind for someone else to use. I'll do it, Endeavor called out, turning a little as though to head to the building. No, let Pyro. Trust me, nothing will be left then, Aizawa said, drawing Pyro's attention. They walked to the back of the ambulance, with the boy fastened to their rib cage tightly. Hold Midnight. You can trust her. I do. I won't be long, Pyro said, rubbing the boy's back before gently passing him to Midnight, who cuddled him close as she dropped down to sit next to Aizawa. Why should Pyro do it? Endeavor asked, the corner of his mouth lifting in a snarl. Because I'm better than you, Pyro replied, before disappearing from their sight. Soon, they heard the telltale sound of fire starting. The entire building then erupted in flames of azure mixed with onyx. Pyro walked through the flames, completely unharmed. They stared as the construction burned, until all that was left was charred remains of the foundation. Aizawa turned to the boy who was curled up in Midnight's lap, holding her hand like it was a lifeline. Probably was. Do you have a name? He asked quietly. Izuku. He whispered after getting a nod from Midnight. You're free now, Izuku. I'll keep you safe. She smiled at the boy, who gave a tiny one back. Pyro stopped at his legs, removing their goggles. Racking one last look over the boy, making sure he was indeed fine, they focused on him. Home. Yes. Home time. He replied. He stood up, and everyone focused on him. Just who is Pyro, Eraser? All Might asked, motioning to the little one next to him, who he bent to pick up. Midnight stood next to him, Izuku clasped to her tightly, neither letting go of the other. He wouldn't be surprised if Midnight adopted the boy. Pyro is mine, he replied, before giving a nod to Nizu and walked off, Midnight following behind. Sure, he and Amiri were only 21, but they'd already made a name for themselves, and with the way she and Izuku were clinging to each other, it would do them both good to become each other's family and support. It was another successful mission, almost. They'd sadly fail those kids, but at least they'd saved Izuku before it was too late for him. And that was thanks to Pyro, his daughter. 16-year-old Izuku Kiyama's arm reached out from under his blanket and slapped the alarm into silence. He shuffled back under the warmth of his haven, but yelped as it was suddenly ripped from above him. Sunlight streamed through the gap in his curtains, beaming him right in the eyeballs. Gah! He rolled over, putting the light behind him as he rubbed his seared retinas. When he opened them again, thankfully they were fine from that sudden burst of light, and sat up. He glared at the person next to him, who just smirked, looking smug as dash. "Get up, you lazy SHD. It's already 9 a.m. We're going to the beach for training before the exams on Monday." And with a whirl, left the bedroom. "Good morning to you too, Reiki," he called out, and all he got was a wave over their shoulder before his bedroom door slammed shut. Reiki was his best friend, ever since they had been about 4/5 years old. He would, without a doubt, be completely lost without that weirdo. Izuku signed as he got out of bed. Why did they have to get up so early? It was a bloody Saturday. "Good morning, Izuku." His quirk, that lived inside of him, said. "Good morning, Syrinx. Did you sleep well?" "I did." "Did you?" "Yes, until Reiki ripped the duvet from above my head." He grumbled as Syrinx let out an amused chuckle. "That is our Reiki for you." And wasn't that the understatement of the century? Both he and Syrinx adored their best friend, even if Reiki was a major handful at times. He raced to his bathroom, emptied his bladder, scrubbed his teeth clean, splashed water on his face to wake up more, and then brushed the unruly mop of black and green curls atop his head. He stretched and grunted happily as his shoulders cracked, releasing the slight stiffness there. He itched a spot on his 10-packed abs before going to his wardrobe and pulled out clothes. He opted for black joggers and a plain black t-shirt. Once done, he grabbed his backpack with a change of clothes in, left his room, and headed downstairs. His mum, Namuri Kiyama, otherwise known as the 18-plus Pro Hero Midnight, was laughing in the kitchen. He followed the tinkling sound and strode into the vast space. Reiki was sprawled at the table, smirking. "What's so funny?" he asked, before smiling as Namuri handed him a plate of eggs, bacon, and toast sided with a glass of fresh orange juice. "Morning, my sunshine. Did Reiki really pull your duvet off you?" "Morning, Mom. Yes, it's true. It was mean. I was comfortable." He grumbled and sat down, dumping his bag at his feet. "Please, you wouldn't have gotten up if I hadn't have done that. And you know it, Aizu." Reiki snorted. Reiki has a point. She handed over a plate of food to Reiki, who thanked her. "Don't you dare team up." Izuku rolled his eyes. "Why not, son?" "Because that sucks. I don't have anyone on my team." He shoveled grub into his mouth and glared, or as much as he was able to. He was just too soft for his own good and couldn't be angry at them. At least, not for long anyway. They knew it too. They, along with a few others, got that side of him. He was somewhat cold towards everyone else. Namuri chuckled as she left them to eat, after giving them a kiss on their cheeks. "It's okay. I'll stop teasing you now. And you know I'll constantly team with you, Izuku. We're family. We stick together through everything like always." Reiki replied, and he grinned at her. She was bearing his mum the best thing in his life. He loved her dearly. He glanced at her as she took her mask off from where it was around her throat. Only a few saw her without it. She had magnificent flame orange eyes with split pupils, framed by long black lashes and highlighted by ever-present dark onyx eyeliner. A small pert nose with a hoop in the left nostril. Full lips held hoop piercings on either side. She had piercings up the sides of her ears. Long hair was up in a high ponytail, jet black with vibrant orange from about halfway down, so it looked like flames. Her gloves were next to her, and he saw her long nails were painted a striking black, as always. And a reason for her mask. She had it on as an air of mystery. Her words, but she was ravishingly appealing. She wasn't cocky with her looks, but kept the mask on due to the unnecessary attention that it brought her, and she hated that. She was, without a doubt, one of the most gorgeous people in the world, but he was biased. She was his best friend/sister, so he was allowed to say that. But even then, he knew it was fact. Just looking at her, you knew it. Her clothes molded to her curvaceous frame, consisting of a tight tank top with an open shirt and black shorts. They finished their food and began washing up. "Hey, Reiki." "Yeah." "How comes you're here so early and not at home with Uncle?" "Dad left early. Nizu wanted to see him." Nizu was their beloved uncle who happened to be the highly respected and powerful principal of U. Hey, any reason why? Not a clue. He didn't tell me. Just told me to come here get food, and not slack off on training with you." She smirked before looping her arm around his shoulders and steered him to the door so they could get their shoes. He slipped on his trainers, and she shoved her feet in Converse. When he tied them up, she handed him a small box. "What's this?" he asked curiously. "Open it," she replied. So he did. Inside lay a thinnish silver chain and a skull pendant. She reached out and turned it over. Etched into the back was their saying, "Always and forever, forever and always." His heart pounded against his rib cage as he stared. "I love it. Thank you, Reiki." He quickly hugged her before she motioned to turn around and put it around his neck. It disappeared beneath his clothing for safekeeping. "You're welcome. Now we can match." He watched as she showed her own before shoving it back where it had been. They grinned at each other. "Mom," he called out while Reiki put her mask on, and he put his own on as well. "Yeah." Midnight appeared from the room near them, which was her office. "We're heading off. See you later." "Sure. Have fun training, and I'll see you tonight." She held her arms out, and they rushed over to give her a hug. About 10 minutes later, Izuku and Reiki were walking towards the beach they'd spent a good 6 or so months cleaning between them to work on stamina training, when they heard an explosion, followed by screams. Both took off running in the direction it came from. Reaching there in a matter of a minute, they saw a crowd had congregated around a building that was slowly burning, and heroes were there preventing anyone from getting close and hurting themselves. Looking around, Izuku noticed that a brown slime thing was chortling and had captured someone in its disgusting grip while using the fire to aid itself. Izuku saw the hostage was ash blonde and had some sort of explosion quirk that he was trying to use to get free, but it wasn't working. If anything, it was just making it worse, and he had about a minute, if that, left before he suffocated. Panic was set in his crimson eyes, met his before bouncing away to the pros. Reiki growled, and he glanced at her before she motioned with her head that the heroes were just standing there. A few of them he recognized. "This is bollocks. My quirk isn't suitable for this because of the fire. Someone get in there quickly and save the kid." Izuku knew that Kamui Woods was right in that regard, and he was trying to hold back some of the bothersome media, clearly getting annoyed with them. At least he was trying to do something. Another one was standing next to him with a bulky build. "We need to wait for someone with a better-suited quirk to fight him." That pissed Izuku off. Why were they standing around and talking? Why weren't they trying something? Sod the quirk. Why were they just standing instead of trying to sort out a strategy? Or even distract the slime thing to allow the kid trapped to, actually breathe? "Izu, let's do this." He looked at Reiki. They nodded in sync, made sure their baseball caps and masks were in place, and she had put her goggles on, and he had his own ones as well. They stashed their bags by the ambulance before they took off at a run. They ignored the shouts behind them. "Izuku, this is pure sludge, apart from the eyes. Strike it. I'll get the hostage." Reiki's voice rang through his mind, and he grunted in acknowledgement before they split. "What's this? Sending in kids to do the job of a hero. How pathetic." The sludge grumbled, tightening its hold. "Who said anything about being pathetic? More like you're describing yourself. I'm coming after you next." So, now Slimy is giving off threats. "Please, my best friend is worse than you." From his peripheral, he saw Reiki manipulating the shadows before they soared around them, effectively blocking out the view of heroes and bystanders from all sides. Izuku crept forward and leapt sideways, barely avoiding the clasp of the slimy hand. "I'm going to kill you, you little BSDRD. It screamed, trying to find them. "You wish you sanctimonious piece of floating SHD." Reiki growled, stabbing a scale-covered hand effortlessly through the sludge and grabbed the now unconscious victim, while Izuku distracted it with a slash of a hidden blade down its eye, making a howl from the sudden pain. She gathered him in her arms and stepped back, in the safety of the shadows, knowing he'd have it covered. The air cleared, giving people a view of what was happening. "We're clear. Your turn, brother," Reiki stated. This is why they worked so well together. Hell, half the time, they didn't communicate, as they didn't have to. They were perfectly in sync with one another. "Do it now, Izuku." Syrinx roared, wanting to do this as much as he did himself. Lightning scream. Izuku screamed. Lightning shot out of the clear sky and into him. He knew people were watching intently, but didn't care. He'd protect everyone from the sludge. Yellow lightning sizzled around his body before he sent it into the sludge, who screamed. Izuku sent more power into it. "You do not attack people, you useless piece of trash," he yelled, just as the sludge stopped moving, looked at him with shock before bursting apart as though it had swallowed a bomb. Izuku threw his hand out, making sure that all the parts stayed compacted in a sphere, and turned to face the onlookers. He knew they wouldn't be able to recognize him properly, and he was thankful for that. Even if he hadn't had his goggles on, they wouldn't have been able to see much due to the mask and cap. "I am here," All Might said as he skidded to a stop next to Kamui, causing many onlookers to squeal in excitement of seeing him up close. "You're too late," Izuku told him, handing over the now dead sludge villain after he'd stuffed it in a bottle he found discarded on the street. Just as it transferred hands, the building behind him rumbled from the rapidly growing flames, and a high-pitched shriek rang out. "Help! Mama!" He whirled around, and a small child was seen in the window, frantically waving at them to get their attention. What the hell was a child doing on their own? Where the hell were the parents? Why were they even left on their own? Useless. "Argo!" Izuku shouted, and Raiki ran past him. He crossed his arms over his chest as he watched his partner run into the flames with zero hesitation. "Holy SHD! No, get back here!" MT Lady called out, just as the building shot out more flames. The girl's mother screamed as tears streamed down her face as she collapsed next to Kamui, a forgotten bag of food next to her. At least that's who he thought it was, judging by that reaction. Someone stood next to him, and Izuku turned his head a little. It was the guy from the sludge. Izuku realized that he was about his age. "I didn't need you to save me. I had it under control," he growled, red eyes virtually spitting in anger. He was dressed in jeans and a t-shirt. "Yeah, really looked it from where we were standing. Now, get back while my partner sorts the rest of this bloody mess out." Izuku grumbled. He wasn't going to take any SHD. Raiki was scarier, and he usually laughed at her face. Before the kid could reply, All Might turned to them. "What you did was incredibly stupid. You could have been seriously injured, young one. Spare me the talk, All Might. I did what they didn't do. You call yourselves heroes. Don't make me laugh. All you did was stand around, not trying because your quirk was not suitable." Huh. A hero is not defined by their quirk, but by the bravery they portray and the willingness to jump into any situation to rescue those in danger, regardless of their well-being. He snapped, uncaring of the media filming, and moved away. The building suddenly groaned, and flames grew before spiraling like mini tornadoes, shot back inside, and winked out of existence. "What's happening?" a bystander asked. Izuku didn't even bother replying as Raiki walked out, holding a blanket-wrapped bundle securely in her arms. She went straight to the ambulance and handed it over. Once done, she went to Izuku, and as one, they marched away after grabbing their bags. Not a single glance back, not even to the boy they'd saved. They decided to just go back to Raiki's to unwind instead of to the beach. When they got to Raiki's and walked into the living area, they were confronted by none other than Aizawa, who had his arms crossed. "OCRP, shouldn't he have been with Nizu? And just what were you two up to?" Aizawa asked, voice calm, and that sent a shiver down their spines. Not because his voice was calm, but because his eyes were blazing in barely controlled anger. "Went to the beach," Raiki answered. "Do not lie to me, my problem child. Now tell me." He pointed to the TV, which was showcasing the event. They knew that they couldn't get out of this one. Not that they'd have lied, just more of misplacing the truth a little. Well, would have, couldn't hear. But then again, they had made a pact when they'd been 5 years old to never lie to their parents, no matter if the truth hurt or not. Letting out identical sighs, they moved to the couch. Ripping goggles, caps, and masks off, they stared at Aizawa, who paced back and forth a little. Raiki replayed everything that had happened, with Izuku putting in bits here or there. "And now you know, Uncle," he said. Aizawa stopped pacing and sat on the table in front of them. "Okay, I get where you were coming from. But you're both underage, and yes, I know you have your hero licenses, but no one, bar a few, knows that. Think yourselves lucky that you weren't recognized by the heroes who know you. I am, however, thankful that you're both safe." He stood up, pulled them to their feet, and hugged them. They wrapped their arms around him, soaking up the hug. They never hesitated at getting an embrace from a male. "We're fine, Dad, I promise. But I do think you need to talk with Uncle Nizu or whoever oversees the heroes." They just stood there doing nothing apart from Kamui. All because their quirks wouldn't work in that scenario. It's exactly as Aizu said, they really need to sort their SHD and priorities out. First, I seriously doubt that Izuku actually swore Reiki. Second, I'll have a chat with Nizu, I give you my word. Nah, the swearing was purely me. But he was right, Dad. In what he said, I did what they didn't do. You call yourselves heroes. Don't make me laugh. All you did was stand around, not trying because your quirk was not suitable. Huh. A hero is not defined by their quirk, but by the bravery they portray and the willingness to jump into any situation to rescue those in danger, regardless of their well-being. She grumbled into his chest. He chuckled and squeezed him a little. I know, brat. I taught you that. Remember. Now, head upstairs and get your gear. As he didn't go to the beach, we're going to training ground for a couple of hours. They stepped back from him. You mean it? Izuku asked, excitement building up inside him. Yeah. Now hurry. You have 5 minutes before I leave without you. They let out a joyous whoop, threw their fists into the air, and raced each other up the stairs to their shared, but mostly Reiki's, bedroom and got their gear. Yes, they love going to training ground, but this was going to kick their arses. They couldn't wait, though. Any chance to train, they grabbed with both hands. A entrance exam. Izuku lay in bed, absently scrolling through his phone before he had to get up. Today was a big one. It was the first day at U, for him and Reiki. He instantly became excited, but also unsure. This was his first time at a proper and professional school, having been homeschooled with Reiki after they found they had a revulsion of middle school. Their quirks had been slightly unstable to be around so many others, who let theirs off as often as they pleased. They'd sat with their parents and explained that they wanted to continue being homeschooled and then try out UA. They'd gotten in by recommendation due to the power of their quirks, as well as brains. Both were exceptionally smart. Sure, Izuku was more on the quiet and observant side, while Reiki was loud and in your face at times, but both absorbed information like a sponge to water. He guessed it was because of the IQ quirk that they had, which had appeared age 10. Both he and Reiki had an IQ over 200, but they weren't cocky about it. Teamed together with their quirks, were just pure strength. They're a force to be reckoned with and unquestionably not to be taken lightly. That wasn't him bragging. That was fact according to his mom, uncle, and others who taught/trained them. Izuku put his phone down and got out of bed. No time anymore for being lazy. Good morning, Izuku. Syrinx said. Good morning, Syrinx. Did you sleep well? I did. Did you? Yes, thanks. Big day today. Indeed it is. Entrance exams, am I right? Yep. I need to get ready before Reiki comes over. Have fun. Talk soon, Kit. Laters. Izuku went to the bathroom, emptied his bladder and scrubbed his teeth clean, splashed cold water on his face, and then brushed his unruly mop curls. He'd had it cut yesterday, so now it was a shaved on the underside with curls falling haphazardly on top. He liked it, and it was much easier to manage. Izuku stretched and grunted happily as his shoulders cracked. Leaving the bathroom, he went to his wardrobe and pulling out clothes. He opted for black jeans, a black shirt, and a green tie. He also put on a waistcoat with velvet green strips down the sides. He and Reiki didn't need to wear the standard uniform at the moment, but that didn't mean he would dress like a slob either. Once done, he snagged up his black shoulder bag and checked he had everything. Once satisfied, left his room and went downstairs. He could hear talking in the kitchen, so headed there. Walking in, Reiki was at the table, chatting to his mom while eating. Morning, he muttered as he sat at the table opposite Reiki. Morning, my sunshine, his mom said, as she placed a plate of pancakes drizzled in honey in front of him before kissing the top of his head. Morning, big guy. Sleep well, Reiki said with a nod. Reasonably well. I think I fell asleep about 1 a.m. He shrugged before taking his bag off. Why at that time? Namiri asked, handing over a mug of coffee. Thanks, Mom. And no idea, just couldn't seem to shut off, so I did some sketches of some things I'll eventually build. Add that to the numerous other designs you've come up with. Raiki chuckled. She's not wrong. His mom grinned. We know that, he muttered before shoving half a pancake in his mouth with a happy hum. His mom left them to eat. He glanced up at Raiki and took in what she wore. He wasn't at all surprised that they fitted and suited her perfectly. She was wearing black skinny jeans, an orange short sleeve blouse, and a black blazer. Well, she'd taken that off at the moment. The blouse color made her eyes pop even more. She had on her standard eyeliner, but had added white liner to the lower lid and striking orange liner above the black. Suited her. Once they finished, they took their dirty plates to the sink and started washing them up. Hey, Raiki. Yeah. How comes you're here and not with Uncle Aizawa having breakfast together? Dad left early. Uncle Nizu wanted to see him before the exams. Any idea why? Not a clue. He just told me to come here, get food, and make sure that we're both on time. She smirked before looping her arm around his shoulders and steered him to the door so they could get their shoes. He slipped on his black, iron-soled combat boots, and she shoved her feet in heavy new rocks with buckles and chains. He noticed she had a black choker around her throat with small skulls along it. Vintage Raiki. They grinned at each other once ready. Mom, he called out while Raiki put her mask on, and he put his own on as well. Yeah, my sunshine. Midnight appeared from the room near them, which was her office. We're heading off. See you later. See you both later. She held her arms out, and they rushed over to give her a quick hug. Soon enough, they moved away, shrugged into their long black coats, left, and began the short trek to UA. They lived close, roughly a 10-minute walk, because his mum happened to be a teacher there. They knew the school like the back of their hands and strolled through the entrance that staff used with special passes. One of the guards noticed them and nodded in respect, which they returned. Izuku checked his mask was fully in place. No one saw his face. He was a handsome guy and didn't want anyone becoming his friend purely because of his looks. Once he trusted them enough, then he'd show his flesh, same as with Raiki. Ready? He asked. Yes. Let's check in with Uncle Nizu first and see if we can observe the entrance exam. They chuckled and strolled into the building. They'd already done their exams, passing with flying colors. They found Nizu, who was coming out of his office. Good morning, my favorite dynamic duo. How are you so far today? He grinned at them. We're good, thanks, Nizu. You heading to the observation room for the entrance exam? Izuku queried. Yes, I am. Would you care to join? See what you both think of this year's examinees. Can we? Raiki asked, and Izuku snorted at the excitement that flashed in her eyes. He was eager to see what sort of people were entering this year. Well, more so their quirks. He had a fascination of finding and studying different ones and documents everything. It was a hobby, no fascination of his. Luckily, it helped in missions as well, because when he saw a quirk, he could break it down within a minute if that. That skill had been used countless times over the years. Of course. Follow me. They did, and before long, they were in the observation deck, along with the other teachers/pros. Both stopped as Aizawa stood up from a chair he'd been sprawled in. What are you two doing here? He questioned. I invited them. Let them document the quirks. You know as well as I do what they're like when they get those brains of theirs working. Nizu chuckled as he took a seat. True. Come on then. They walked over and sat down after removing their coats. Izuku pulled out 2 new journal books, as well as pens, and handed one to Raiki, who nodded thanks. Why are you here anyway? Raiki turned to look at Eraserhead. I teach here, you know that. I know that. I mean, I didn't think you'd be watching the entrance exam. Does this mean we'll see you more too? Yeah, you will. Awesome. Raiki held her fist out, and Izuku watched, amused as her and Eraserhead fist bumped and the teachers stared wide-eyed. Clearly, he lived up to his reputation of showing barely anything towards anyone. But there was something that they'd soon learn. Aizawa was affectionate towards him and Raiki. Sure, he was still a badass, drilling them to the point of exhaustion in training, but they enjoyed it. And he loved them, just as they loved him. Who are the kids? A voice called out, and they glanced over. It was Endeavor. Both had a severe dislike of the pro. There was something about him that they just didn't trust, not a single bit. Izuku curled his lip in disgust. Did the BSDRD not remember that night? Oh wait, who was he kidding? If it didn't revolve around him, he forgot, as though it had never happened. He's a very conceited arsehole. They're with me and Nizu. Now, sit down and let us observe. It's about to start. Aizawa replied coldly before they turned to the screens that allowed them to see all. Izuku watched as the crazily loud cockatoo, otherwise affectionately known as Uncle Mike, got the ball rolling by screaming go, and the gates opened. Why are you not moving? There are no real starts in battle. Villains wait for no one. Examinees eventually took off running, while Izuku rolled his eyes. Not a good start, was it? Both he and Raiki focused on the screens, scribbling down things at lightning speed. Yes, this was the entrance exam, and no one would find out if they passed or not for 2 or so weeks. But he and Raiki were already starting because they were getting extra training for their quirks and private lessons with Nizu. But no one knew that. He glanced at Raiki, and she had her gaze locked on a screen with an eyebrow raised slightly. You wouldn't have noticed the slight shift, but he knew Raiki better than anyone. He followed her gaze to see an ash blonde who was making explosions come out of his hands. He was presently panting hard after defeating, well, more like pulverizing at least 8 one-pointers in one go with a smug smirk. Not bad. Give him training in better precision shots, and he'd definitely be one to watch as he climbed the ranks of Powerhouse. What do you reckon so far? Nizu probed, gaining their attention. There are some that shouldn't be allowed in. They're useless in the regard of training to become a hero with their quirks. But I do, however, think they'd be ideal for the other areas you have to offer which would be better suited for them. Raiki responded. Such as? Aizawa asked. Izuku looked at her, and she pointed her notes. He glanced at what one she indicated and bobbed in silent agreement. These. She handed over the notes, and they nodded. Izuku knew they'd back them because they weren't wrong. Not being big-headed about it. They were just giving straight facts. Okay, that should be enough now. Let's see how they deal with the main obstacle. Nizu leaned forward, flipped a lid on a panel in front of him, and pushed the red button underneath it. Many of the pros groaned / got worried at the sadistic glee that appeared on the principal's face, but the duo didn't react at all. The ground reverberated, and Izuku stared out the window, but couldn't see much, so he got up to have a better look at the scene below. A 0-pointer had arrived. It was taller than the buildings, so around 10 stories high. It hit a building, causing huge chunks of cement and glass to crash to the floor. Examinees turned to run, like a flock of mindless sheep. An alarm went off, and Izuku's head snapped around, instantly catching Nizu's gaze before he focused on Power Loader, who was typing furiously on a laptop. He turned to look outside, just as the robot leaned down and blasted a fist into the ground, creating a vast dust cloud. What is happening, Higuri? Nizu questioned Power Loader. Due to hitting the building, and now the ground, it's unfortunately trapped an examinee under the rubble. It isn't responding to the shutdown commands either. It's viewing her as a threat. If I can't get it to respond, it's going to crush her. Higuri said, panic clear in his voice. Some gazes went to a screen, showing the girl in question. She was a tiny brunette with natural rosy cheeks, who was frantically trying to get the slab off her ankle, with tears streaming from wide, panic-laced chocolate eyes. Pros got up quickly, moving towards the door, praying that they weren't late to save her. The dust cleared slightly, and Izuku growled. What is it, brother? He turned to Raiki, who stared at him perplexed. These worthless idiots are just running away, not even thinking of saving the girl. Some heroes they are aspiring to become. He gritted out, eyes laced with disgust and fury. Izuku. Nizu was staring at him with a knowing smirk. I'll stop it. Pros won't make in time. Izuku grunted, stopping the adults before they left. How will you do that? Ectoplasm asked. Do it. Nizu told him, and Izuku nodded, not answering Ectoplasm. He threw open the windows, ignoring the pros shouting no because of the drop, but he ignored them and leapt, landing with ease, his modified boot soles absorbing the impact. This was nothing that he couldn't handle. Syrinx, are you seeing this? Yes. It's disgusting that they're just going to leave her there. Let us show them what it means to be a true hero kid. The fox griped, and Izuku felt power ripple through him as Syrinx lent his strength. He raced through the crowd, who'd stopped to stare at him with genuine curiosity. He paid them no attention as he ran before skidding to a stop next to the trap girl, who was getting desperate, clawing at the rubble now. There was a small bit of vomit near her. Quirk overuse / drawback. From fear, or perhaps a mixture of both. What we got? He glanced over his shoulder as Reiki emerged. He wasn't surprised she'd followed him. Busted ankle maybe. Get her out carefully and move to safety. I'll take care of the rest. She nodded, bent a little, and lifted the slab like it was weightless before pulling the girl out with ease. Izuku ran up the robot's body like it was nothing until he was landed on the head. No one is behind the bot. Clear for disassemble. Syrinx told him. Thank you, he replied before holding his hands out. Lightning clap. He roared as lighting erupted from the cloudless sky, hit his palms, and he sent it flying into the head under his feet, completely frying everything inside. Fox split, lifting his right hand, clenched it tight, and punched it into the machine. It split in two and toppled over. He leapt off, landing easily, and went to Reiki, who held the girl in her arms. Her ankle had a nasty purple bruise covering it. Let me heal that for you. He held his hand out, and a white light erupted out of his palm to settle over her skin. Once done, the light disappeared, and she was as good as new. Thank you so much. The girl beamed as Reiki put her down. They towered over her tiny 5'2" to 3" frame, considering he was 5'10" and Reiki was 5'8" flat feet. You're welcome, he replied. My name is Achiko. Achiko Uraraka, she said with a small bow. Nice to meet you. I'm Izuku, and this is Reiki. No last name. She looked at his sister before back to him. Yeah, but you'll maybe find out what it is. And with that, Reiki walked off. Don't worry about Reiki. That's just how she is. Anyway, I'm off too. Good luck, Uraraka. Recovery Girl made an appearance to double-check on her, but he didn't stop to talk. He just winked, making the old pro chuckle with a grin before he dashed after Reiki. Both shoved their hands into their pockets with a smirk. They left silently as everyone stared. No doubt wondering how he'd managed to defeat the zero-pointer with barely breaking a sweat and monstrous power, or where Reiki had appeared from, or who they were considering how they were dressed. They'd find out in due time. A official first day. Reiki groaned as her alarm blared, shooting through her ears and waking her from a deep slumber. She slapped it into silence before rubbing sleep from her eyes. She sat up and cracked her shoulders. Slipping her feet into her slippers, she peered over at the other bed that was beside hers but against the wall. She smirked as she saw a tuft of black and green hair peeking from the top of the duvet. That was all that could be seen. Rolling her eyes, Reiki disappeared into the bathroom and sorted herself out. Walking back in her bedroom, orange toothbrush hanging out her mouth, she shook her brother awake. He grumbled at her. 5 more minutes, Reiki. Nope. Get up, you lazy arsehole. First official day and all that SHD. We're going to find out which extras are going to be in our class for the next however long. She threw the duvet back, and he glared before stretching languidly. If I'm a lazy arsehole, then you're clearly a beach. The correct term, I shall have you know, is Captain Beach. And don't you forget it, my beloved first mate arsehole. They chuckled at that. He cracked as he stretched. His tightly muscled body was highlighted by the sunlight that streamed through the windows as she yanked open the curtains, flooding the room with light. She knew he was good-looking, but couldn't see the rapt fascination that others had with him. Probably because he was pretty much her brother in all, but BLD and the fact they might as well be joined at the hip. He threw the duvet off completely and stood up. His pajama shorts hung low on his hips, showing off the deep V-line he had, and drew your attention towards his 10-pack as well. He strolled into the bathroom, and she waited for him to finish. I'm done, he called out, which was followed by the toilet flushing. She opened the door and finished brushing her teeth. Once done, she went to get dressed. Clicking on her stereo, music blared as she started to dance along. Bobbing her head to the beat of the song, she slipped off her silk nightie and dragged on her new, orange underwear. The bottoms cupped her pert, arse like a lover, but left half her cheeks on display. The BR molded to her and shoved her melons together more than they already were. Since PBRTY had snuck up and smack her one, she'd filled out a lot and quickly. So much so, she was now an E-cup and still growing. She dreaded to think in how much more her melons would grow. They already annoyed her at times. Stupid things. Reiki put on deodorant before she yanked on fishnet tights and socks. Shimmied into her knee-length skirt and tugged up shorts underneath too. White tank top next, then her blouse over it, just as Izuku walked out. He'd changed into his uniform. She finished buttoning up her blouse, leaving the top 3 buttons undone, and put her tie on. But she didn't have it done up all the way. It was half done, just how she wanted it. She was kind of presentable, but she wasn't going to feel as though she was being choked/suffocated all the time. That SHD putting on her blazer, she turned to Izuku, who was sat on the edge of his bed, pulling on socks. She turned off the stereo, plunging the room into silence. "What do you think will happen today?" she queried, as she went to her stained oak vanity and put on her usual eyeliner and mascara. "Honestly, I'm not sure, Reiki. Probably something to do with our quirks," he replied as she glanced at him in the mirror as he sorted out his bag. "Which quirk will you use?" She turned to him properly. "Not sure. All depends on the test. But it'll probably be Syrinx." "Let him out." "Sure." Next thing she knew, there was a small fox next to him. Syrinx was what was known as an Elemental Kitsune. He was jet black with the undertone of red in color, with big ears. Eyes were BLD red, and looking in them, you could tell he was ridiculously intelligent. Paws held razor-sharp claws that could cleave a tree in half with a well-placed strike. He had all of his little tails out, each a different colored tip, representing different elements. She loved the little monster. "Reiki." He grinned at her, sharp teeth on full display. She laughed and held her arms open, and he dived on her lap. She wrapped her arms around him, cuddling him close. "Hey, Syrinx." She placed a kiss to his button nose and rubbed her fingers against his ears, causing him to let out a contented rumble that was like a purr as his chin hit her chest and his eyes shut in radiant happiness. Adorable little. She glanced at Izuku, who was mumbling to himself while going over one of his many private black journals. "You okay?" Her question had him snapping from his thoughts and focusing on her. Legitimate fear/unease was etched into his features. "Okay." She wasn't expecting that look. She put Syrinx down on her bed and let her own monster out. Her main quirk, called Pyro. She was a spectacular dragon, jet black and orange scales. She had luminous orange eyes that seemed to stare right through you. She had thick claws that were easily an inch or so long in this form, and as dangerous as Syrinx's. Wings were thin-skinned, yet strong and durable. She loved her baby. Both Pyro and Syrinx cuddled on her bed as she moved to Izuku and sat next to him. "What's with that look on your face, Izu?" "I'm scared, Reiki." "Okay." She wasn't expecting that answer. "Why?" She kept her voice calm and alluring, just as she had when they were growing up. It worked in keeping him calm and relaxed, and not over-panicking. "What if I'm not good enough? Or I really hurt someone?" "First of all, shut the up. Get those ridiculous thoughts out of your head. You're a DMN well good enough. You are brave, courageous, smart, funny, and kind. You're an appealing man both inside and out. When you care with your entire being. You won't hurt anyone unless it is necessary. I know for a fact on that. And if, somehow, you do lose control, I'll take you on. Don't forget, you're going to be the best hero that you can possibly be. I won't settle for you being anything less than no one." Well, both weren't interested in that, to be honest, with wanting to be an underground pro like her dad, but if that somehow didn't work out, then they were aiming for the top 2. Keep their options open and all that bullshit. But they're truly aiming for being underground because of already being used to that. Plus, when they graduated, both her and Izuku planned on launching their own hero agency. They didn't want to work under anyone who'd dictate their every move. No way, no how, no thanks. Plus, they didn't do this for the fame or money. They wanted to the voice for those who were unheard. "Thanks, Reiki. And that means you'll be no, too. Also, I love you." "I love you, too. And yep, I'm going to be no, too, and we're going to be the best tag team for life. We work in sync without even trying, so we're already well ahead of anyone else. Now let's finish getting ready, stuff our faces with food, then go kick, but it's school. Now who are we? She leapt to her feet and yanked him up with her. We are the dynamic duo. He grinned. Sorry, I couldn't catch that. I said who are we? She screamed. We are the dynamic duo. He shouted. They laughed as they hugged, before scooping up their little monsters and went to get some food to feed the pits that were their stomachs. Once they'd eaten and cleaned up, Izuku and Raiki finished getting ready for school. Their little monsters had already vanished, so they were safe. They donned their masks, and Raiki had her trademark choker on. Izuku made sure that he had everything, including a can of energy drink and snacks. He shrugged into his black coat and put his backpack on. Glancing at Raiki as she put on her new leather jacket, earphones, and bag, which was unsurprisingly covered in patches of bands she liked and skulls, shoved her feet into her heavy new rocks, she grinned at him. He smiled back, and not for the first time. He thought of how lucky he was to have her in his life. He really did love her. She was his sister in all ways, but BLD. If he could change that, though, he would in the span of a heartbeat. The thing that he didn't want, however, which was kind of mean and selfish of him, was the day that she got into a relationship and had no time for him anymore. Yes, it's inevitable of her getting with someone because, hello, she was amazing, but that didn't mean he wanted to be stingy and keep her just to himself for a bit longer. Sure, he'd maybe get in a relationship himself, but he wasn't looking. If it happened, then it happened, but he wasn't holding his breath. Snapping those thoughts away, he shoved his feet into his specialized iron-soled combat boots, and then they left. Not all that much longer, they approached the gates of UA. Due to the time of their arrival, only a few students plotted about the grounds. Izuku paid little attention to that, as they strode forward with sure steps and went inside the building, ignoring the inquisitive glances and murmurs of who they were. He guessed because they had such a powerful presence, they wanted to know. Using his photographic memory, he mentally pulled up the entirety of UA. He quickly sourced out their classroom. Walking to it, Raiki followed, trusting him completely, and in the span of a minute, arrived at where they needed to be. It was a huge doorway, almost as though in preparation for anyone that had a quirk that allowed them to be bigger than normal. And all that went through Izuku's mind was that it was easily big enough for All Might to walk through in his buff form and stand with arms splayed and still have plenty of room. With a silent chuckle, he looked at Raiki. Ready for this? He asked. Ready as we will ever be, she replied, just as voices could be heard from inside. Opening the door, the duo strolled in, making the voices stop as everyone turned to stare at them. They looked around at the class, before locking eyes Aizawa, who was staring at them. Okay, everyone. These two are also from recommendations. Before he could say anything else, a giant squeal came from near the back of the room. Izuku peered over and saw it was the girl that they'd saved in the entrance exams. Oh my god, it really is you. You're the ones who saved me from that zero-pointer. Thank you again, so much. She jumped up and raced, enthusiastically shaking his hand. She went to shake Raiki's, but she just growled, causing her to shrink back in a mix of shock and fear. He understood Raiki's reaction, though. She didn't like people touching her unless she said it was okay or initiated it herself. They'd learn that soon enough. You're welcome, Uraraka. Now, best go and sit down before Sensei gets any more annoyed. Izuku said and went over to Aizawa with Raiki. You didn't tell us that you were going to be our teacher. Strike us down now. Izuku groaned, causing Aizawa to smirk at him. And that's why I didn't. 2 chairs at the side, go plunk your arses there. You're 10 minutes late. Cry me a river. Raiki muttered as the duo did as they were told. Thankfully, he and Raiki were seated next to each other, like their desks were joined, and in front of them was a guy with spiky ash blonde hair that just glared at everyone from crimson eyes. He strangely reminded him of Raiki. He could feel the burning stares of the class, wondering why Aizawa was like that with them, but they'd find out in due time. Until then, they'd say nothing. Right, now, there's a couple of minutes before I start class properly, so talk amongst yourselves. But know this, if you're here to make friends, go home now. This isn't a time for friendships or anything. This is to train you to become the best heroes of your ability. And with that, Aizawa walked out. The room erupted into conversation, but Izuku and Raiki stayed silent. "Hi, I don't believe we've formally met." A voice made him raise his head and focus on a blue-haired guy with blue eyes framed by glasses that had approached them. "Nope, we haven't. And you are?" "Tenya Ida. I'm from Somei Junior High School. Pleasure to meet you both. Although I didn't see you at the entrance exam, either of you." He made this weird robot-type move with his arms. "What a strange fellow. That's because we're here on recommendation. Aizawa already said that, you dumb dash. So, do us a favor, go back to your seat and shut the up." Raiki growled as she glared at him. Izuku barely managed to keep back the snort, but the guy in front burst out laughing while Ida sputtered. "That is no way to treat a fellow classmate. And I really couldn't give a flying what you think. I'm not here to make friends with a bunch of pansy, but mother heirs. Heck, from what I saw at the entrance exam, you're one of the biggest pansies going, leaving her to be squished like a fly in a trap when that zero-pointer made an appearance." Raiki pointed to Uraraka, who blushed in embarrassment. Izuku felt that someone was watching him intently, so turned in his chair. A guy sat at the back of the room, staring at him curiously from two different colored eyes, even though the rest of his face was unreadable. Even his hair was different, half white and half red, split perfectly down the middle. Izuku realized exactly who he was. Shoto Todoroki, Endeavor's youngest Sprague. Poor BSDRD. He faced back the proper way, just as Raiki stood up, forcing Ida to back up quickly, along with Uraraka that had moved to stand next to him. The entire class fell silent as they realized that she was taller than the other girls, more so with those boots she had on, hell, even more than a couple of the guys too. But this was one of the things Izuku loved about her. She didn't back down from anyone, not even her dad. "Back the off before I put my fist into your face faster than you can say holy motherer," she growled. Izuku knew that her eyes had changed to their glacial look because of her rigid posture, so he stood as well. He looped his arm around her shoulder, and she visibly relaxed. Better to calm her down quick before anything happened. "Look, if I were you, I'd go and sit at your desk before she really does kick your arse," Izuku said before Ida said anything. Thankfully, he moved away quickly with Uraraka. Raiki sat down, and the guy in front of them turned sideways in his chair to face them. Izuku stared at him. "Name's Katsuki Bakugu. Nice to know you're not afraid, or cautious to say what you think." He held his hand out in a shake. Raiki stood up, leaned over her desk, and got right in his face, making him retract his hand quickly before it banged into her chest. Everyone held their breath, as they'd already had the unpleasant acquaintance of the unpredictable firecracker. Just who was this person to make him be like that? Friend or foe? The entire class watched the exchange, but one person had their eye on her, thinking she was seriously hot, of what could be seen anyway. But was she straight, lesbian, or what? That would be something to find out before they try to get closer. Sure, she was rather hot-headed and had quite the prolific vocabulary, but that didn't diminish the appeal of her. And I think you're maybe the only one, apart from my brother here, that I'll be able to tolerate for more than 5 seconds. Name's Raiki. Nice to meet you, Bakugu. She blinked slowly, and Izuku knew what was happening. Bakugu, without a single ounce of doubt, was going to fall for her. Hard. One temperamental person to another. Izuku wondered how that would work out. But say that they did somehow get together, if Bakugu treated Raiki right, then Izuku wouldn't kill him. She was the one in who he would make an exception for, along with his mom and uncles, of course. He'd kill to save or protect them, regardless of the consequences. Nice to meet you, Raiki. And who's your brother? Bakugu turned his attention to him. Name's Izuku, he told him as Raiki sat down and stretched her legs out in front of her. God, I'd love me a piece of that. Imagine running my hands all over that gorgeous frame as much as I please. A high-pitched and annoying voice came across the room, and both of their heads snapped around to see who it was. It was a small guy/child thing with large purple ball on its head as he openly stared at Raiki, drooling a little. Disgusting. A girl with jacks from her earlobes said, glaring at him with revulsion. Raiki, however, just focused on Izuku, with eyes narrowed. They heard a commotion outside, but they didn't pay attention to it. Izuku nodded once, and she grinned behind a mask. Reiki stood up, cracked her knuckles, and before anyone could say, let alone do anything, she was across the classroom, had grabbed the great beach, and slammed him into the wall. Holding him in place by his throat, her gloved fingers locked tightly in place. How did she move that quick? Someone questioned. Next time you make another disgusting comment like that, mark my words, you little BSDRD, I will either skin you and put your defleshed body above an open fire pit and slowly burn you alive, or I'll beat you into a bloody pulp and laugh while I do it. Do I make myself clear? She snarled. Power reverberated off her as smoke billowed through the mask, and everyone panicked, apart from Izuku, who let out a chuckle. If anyone would do something like that, it was Reiki. The pervert was lucky that she'd gotten to him first, because Izuku would have done some hefty damage to him for saying that about his sister. At least she only said it and not actually done it. Improvement. Why, yes. He whimpered, visibly shaking with fear. You had better do. Izuku just watched it all in mild amusement. What is going on in here? Aizawa demanded as he stormed in, teaching a little BSDRD some manners about respect to women. Reiki sneered, not looking away as she stared right into the guy's eyes. The small fry was trying desperately to make her let go, but it was useless. Izuku glanced at Bakugu and snorted. The guy was openly staring at Reiki with what appeared to be nothing but a mix of love, respect, and awe. Weirdo. Let him go, Aizawa said, putting a hand on her shoulder. The smoke stopped, but there was no mistaking that she was pissed. Fine, but it's purely for the fact that you asked me to. But mark my words, you little BSDRD, if I hear anything like that out of your mouth again regarding anyone, just remember what I said. And if I don't get you, I know some people who most certainly will. She snapped, let the little BSDRD drop to the floor with a thud, and walked back to him, dropping in her chair. Izuku rubbed his hand between her shoulder blades. Bakugu turned fully in his chair, leaned forward to whisper something to her, and she nodded. Izuku glanced back at the guy Reiki just strangled. He was on the floor, crying and trying to get as much air as he could into his starved lungs. A handprint around his throat, stark red against the paleness of his flesh. Okay, now that's sorted before anything worse transpired. Get changed into these. Meet me on Beta Ground. You have 5 minutes. Aizawa handed out outfits in clear bags. What for, sir? Ida asked, his arms moving in a robotic motion. Was the guy some kind of half-robot or something? That was not normal being that stiff. I'm going to be testing you, he replied before walking out with some paperwork. Does anyone actually know where that is? A guy asked as he grabbed his belongings. We do, Izuku said, drawing his dark gaze to his own. Do you mind if we follow you? Sure. His bag, coat, and kit clasped in his palm. He went to the changing rooms. As he and Reiki split to go in the appropriate area, they fist bumped. Now it was time to get started. Katsuki Bakugu rolled his shoulders as he emerged from the changing room, followed by the extras of his class, who were chatting between themselves about what they were about to face. As they neared the girls' changing room, the door opened, and someone slammed into him. He balanced himself and saw who it was. Reiki. Well, just from that clash of their bodies, he knew she was soft in all the right places yet toned. He took in what she was wearing as she racked her gaze over everyone else. Her outfit was a little tight and just made him want to peel it off to get to the delectable skin underneath. Okay, what was he thinking? He never thought about this SHD, but there was just something about her that had already drawn him in. And no, it wasn't the fact she swore as much, if not more than he did. Bakuga guessed it was maybe when she'd not taken any of Ida's SHD, or when she'd manhandled and threatened Mineta, the little great pervert, with barely any effort or backing down until Aizawa told her to let go. Hell, Izuku had just laughed at her. Was that normal for them? Where's my brother? Her hypnotic voice washed over him, causing goosebumps to race down his spine. He hoped, too, that no one was close enough to notice. I'm here, Reiki. Izuku's voice rang out behind them as he walked towards her. Bakugu watched as a smile appeared underneath her mask and lit up those appealing orange eyes of hers as she stared at Izuku. Now, the real question was how could Bakugu get her to look at him with that smiling gaze? Or take the mask off to reveal what she looked like underneath. Izuku also had his mask on, but Bakugu wasn't interested in him in the least. Well, maybe apart from as a friend. He reckoned he'd be one of those that'd be a great guy to hang with. As Izuku stopped next to his sister, the light flickered and beamed her square in the face, making it appear as though her eyes had flames burning behind them. Or was that just a part of his imagination? Shall we go then, Captain Beach? He punched her on the arm, and she laughed. Let's go, my dear first mate arsehole. She hit him back, and he dived for her, but she dodged and ran out of the corridor as he chased after her. As the siblings departed, Bakugu noticed that the back of her outfit left nothing to the imagination of the fact that she had a pert, luscious arse. Long legs, curved spine that he wanted to run his tongue up, and all that SHD minute. He was starting to feel excited. Snapping from his thoughts, he and the extras started walking again, just as the door opened next to him and the girls emerged. They strode out as one big group to where Aizawa had told them to go, and they heard laughter. And in front of them, the two siblings were facing each other, already having smears of dust on their bodies. What had they done already? There was no one else around, so where was the teacher? They stopped as Raiki raced to Izuku. I'm going to kick your arse, mother. Raiki roared as she smashed a solid fist into her brother's face, snapping it to the side, but he just turned back and smirked. Huh, when you're big and ugly enough, plus lose the weight from that fat, but then you might have a somewhat chance. Izuku countered, diving behind his sister and sent a stinging slap to her arse cheek. The girls and some guys cringed at how hard it was, but Raiki just snorted and dived on him, sending them sprawling into the dirt floor. What is going on? Kaminari queried. He was blonde, with a black streak like a bolt, and his quirk was to do with electricity. Not a clue, bro, replied Kirishima, a redhead who could harden his entire body. They watched as Izuku rolled and pinned Raiki to the floor, sitting on her torso and trapping her arms with his knees, playfully tapping his fingers against her cheeks while she growled. Somehow Raiki managed to get wiggle room, put her feet into Izuku's armpits, and kicked him into the air. She leapt to her feet, grabbed him from midair, and smashed him into the ground with a solid thump. That must have hurt like a beach. No doubt about it, considering he bounced once. I'm not fat. I am fluffy. She snapped before jabbing a knee into his side. That's going to leave a mark. Momo muttered, standing next to Bakugu, who paid little attention to their already dubbed class beauty, and just watched the siblings fight. Izuku jumped to his feet and launched a punch to his sister's ribs, sending the breath racing out of her lungs. Keep on lying to yourself, you hippo. The class gasped at that. Imagine saying that to your sister. That was totally uncalled for and disrespectful. Ida snapped, waving his arms like usual. Bakugu was impressed by their fighting prowess, though. He reckoned they'd give him or anyone a hefty run. What the hell is going on here? A voice snapped behind them. Aizawa had arrived. I'm going to claw your bollocks off. Raiki growled before slamming her shoulder into Izuku's ribs and drove him into the ground. She snapped that hot gaze of hers to them quickly before focusing back on her brother as he grabbed her wrist and flipped her over, sending her crashing into the dirt. Pay attention to your opponent. Izuku snapped before they flipped to their feet and threw a punch in each other's face. Bakugu was surprised that didn't knock some teeth out from the brutal impact. Just how hard were they hitting each other? The solid connection was enough to make even him wince in sympathy. I'm paying attention. You piece of SHD, Raiki growled. That answers that question. Aizawa groaned and went to the sparring siblings. He grabbed them by their shoulders, making them stop and look at him. Just how brave was their teacher to get between those brutal hits? Bad butt, what are you two playing at? Aizawa snapped at them, but Bakugu saw that they weren't fazed by that at all, having a bit of fun and letting off some steam. Been a while since I got a play fight like this with Aizu, as though we're quirkless. Raiki replied as he let them go. She lifted her mask a little, but not enough that they could see anything, and spat out a glob of BLD. Wait a minute. They hadn't been using their quick. What the actual dash? Save it for later. We have stuff to do. They nodded before brushing themselves down. This had been purely for fun. Holy SHD. Or were they like if they were serious? Definitely not something to find out. Everyone joined them, albeit hesitantly. Bakugo, however, stood right next to Raiki, with Izuku on the other side of her. The extras, he didn't give a SHD about. Well, apart from Kirishima, but that's because they grew up together and he was his best friend. Aizawa turned to stare at them. Bakugo. He stepped forward. Yes. How far was your last throw in school? Minus using your quirk. 67 meters. Okay, try again, but with your quirk this time. Step into the circle, but if you go over it, it does not count. Bakugo smirked as he caught a ball that was thrown to him. Die! He yelled. Making a giant explosion in his hands, he launched the ball. He turned to Aizawa just as his phone beeped. After looking at it and jotting down the score, he turned it to show the rest of them. 706 meters. That's so manly. Kirishima called out, clapping. Bakugo rejoined them. Can I try? Raiki questioned. Sure. Aizawa handed her another ball. Are these fireproof? Yep. He smirked a little. Bakugo wondered why. She glanced at the group. You might want to link arms, or whatever, and then latch on to Izuku. They did as they were told, while Izuku grumbled about them touching him. She loosened her shoulders and faced the correct way. Bakugo was curious as to why they had to hold on to each other, though, and why latch on to Izuku, but he did so anyway, linking their arms together. The solid muscle under his arm was enough to make him blink a couple of times. Hell, just how ripped was this guy? No one had seen him change earlier because he'd gone into one of the shower stalls. Dragon throw. Raiki roared, threw her arm back as it was engulfed in bright flames from the elbow down, and she flung the ball. It soared through the sky with a deafening scream. Think sound barrier, and the backdraft was immense. Wind lashed over them, and now Bakugo knew why they'd had to hold onto each other. The only thing keeping them where they were was Izuku, who'd locked his legs in place. Aizawa didn't move either. Raiki smirked and walked back over, after the flames disappeared from her arm, as though they had never been. Aizawa's phone beeped. Again he jotted something down, then showed them. How was that possible? How did you get 11,860 meters? Momo queried, staring wide-eyed. I didn't even try. That was amateur of me. Izuku, you do it too. She pushed her brother, who just rolled his eyes and took a ball from Aizawa. Hold on to each other. Raiki warned, and they did again. But this time, they latched onto Bakugo, who in turn grabbed her hand. She didn't even acknowledge it, apart from locking her fingers with his tighter. Kaminari tried taking her other hand, making her head turn quick enough to get whiplash and a snarl to rumble from her chest. Bakugo just smirked at him behind her back. Thankfully, no one commented on it, but he did wonder why she tolerated him and no one else. That was a first. Usually people avoided him. They focused on Izuku, who held his arm at his side, but rolled his shoulders. Then held his arm back a little, and his stance changed to alleviate the throw better. Fox throw. He roared as blue lightning shot down his arm, and he launched the ball. A crater emerged where he was, which had to be a good foot or so deep. The ball disappeared from their line of vision as wind howled around them. Again, it was the same as when Raiki had her turn and she stamped her feet into the ground to keep them in place. Everyone moved, though, but because of her grip on Bakugo's hand, they didn't get far. Izuku strolled over, and Raiki let go of his hand to knock both her fists in her brother's. Aizawa showed them the score. Dude, seriously? Zero asked. He was a weird. 1. He shot tape out his elbows. Knock off Spider-Man. What? Izuku responded, peering over his shoulder at the guy. How the hell did you get 20,500 meters? Practice. And that wasn't my best. Bakugo wasn't paying much attention as his mind was going nuts. He'd held Raiki's hand, and she'd snarled at Kaminari when he'd try to hold her other one. What did that mean for him? Either which way, he was ecstatic. Okay, now that we've had a practice run, time for some other tests. Aizawa stated. Sir, before we start, what about the opening ceremony? Momo questioned. We don't have time for that. This is a hero school. If you want that, then join another class. Plus, I teach my class how I see fit. At least we can use our quirks. This will be fun. Uraraka squealed, clapping her hands with a smile. How annoying. Bakugu rolled his eyes at the childish manner. Grow thee up, idiot. This is not for fun. This is not some child's game. Do you think that natural disasters, or villains attacking, just because they want to cause an uproar, are fun? If you seriously think that, then do us a favor and leave now. Raiki snapped. I was just saying, Uraraka grumbled. And that's where it's childish. You're in the top hero school for Christ's sake. You're here to learn how to become the best hero of your abilities. Not go all GA because you can use your shitting quirk. Newsflash, if you're not ready, you're going to be completely obliterated by the time you leave here. And that's if you manage to last these 3 years of rigorous training and study. Raiki rolled her eyes before looking back at Aizawa. Bakugu sided with her. She was right, this was no game. Majority of heroes didn't last the first 2 or so years once they graduated, either by death or because they couldn't hack it, so stopped. This was definitely not something to laugh about. Raiki is right, this is not fun in games. Do you think villains will be willing to stop just because you're exhausted, bleeding out, and in pain? No. They will take sadistic glee in causing you as much pain as they possibly can. Okay, let's spice it up a bit. Last place gets expelled. Aizawa exclaimed, making nearly everyone panic. It wasn't helped by the sight of the sadistic grin on the man's face. Izuku cracked his knuckles as he waited with Raiki. The raven-haired girl from before stood on his other side. Why was she so close to him anyway? He hated people too close to him. He had barely tolerated when they'd held on to him when Raiki had thrown the ball. No, he wasn't a germaphobe or whatever, he just didn't like people touching him without his permission. Because, consent and all that SHD was important. He did internally laugh, though, when Aizawa had said about last place being expelled and then showing that smirk of his. He wasn't at all surprised by that. Hell, the man was worse on him and Raiki when training, so this would hardly be anything of a hardship for the siblings. And Raiki was also right in what she'd said. This was no game. They knew of that firsthand. Okay, the tests are ball throwing, grip test, side-to-side jump, upwards jump, and a 50-meter dash. Aizawa declared, reading off his chart. Ready for this? He asked Raiki, who was just picking at her gloves. Let's do this. Best beach wins. They fist bumped. Begin. Aizawa shouted. Izuku flew through everything, which weren't really much of a challenge for him. To start was the 50-meter dash. Ito was the quickest, scoring 3. 35 seconds, then Izuku went and sprinted across. The timer came back of 1. 35 seconds, making jaws drop. He watched as Raiki went, and she got 2. 5 seconds. He broke the grip machine, even after getting another one out, one that All Might uses. Side to side, he used about 10% of his power and stepped around 1055 steps in 30 seconds. Upwards jump, he flew 20 feet and landed in a perfect crouch. He didn't really pay attention to anyone's results. The scores at the end would be proof enough. How strong are you? A monotone voice questioned, drawing his gaze. It was none other than Shoto Todoroki himself. That was nothing. I only used about 10% of my true power. He replied, before Raiki joined him and looped her pinky with his own. It was their comfort thing and had been for as long as they could honestly remember. It also grounded them both. Soon enough, the results were in. First was Izuku, second was Raiki, third was Baku, fourth was Todoroki, and so on until last, but not least was Mineta. No, I'm going to be expelled. He cried. Fire. We won't miss you. Raiki sneered. Actually, the expulsion thing was a ruse. It was actually a test for you to bring the best in yourselves out. Aizawa said, smirking at them. Mineta now cried tears of joy, and Izuku thought he was truly pathetic. Others, however, looked dumbfounded. Are you serious? They shouted as one, apart from the top 4. Come on, guys. It was clear that it was just a ruse. I'm sorry, I should have said something. The raven-haired girl said. Yes, you should have Momo. Kaminari replied, giving her a bit of a stink eye. Now Izuku knew her name. He could stop labeling her as the raven-haired beauty. Not that it was his fault. That's what others had dubbed her. She was just a woman to him. Looks weren't everything. Hell, you could be drop-dead gorgeous, but have the personality of a dung beetle. Or be what others classed as ordinary, and be one of the coolest people ever. Those are the types he'd rather be associated with. Izuku also supposed that he should learn their names. It would make everything a lot easier. I wouldn't be so sure of that. Aizawa got rid of an entire class last year on the first day because they didn't impress him or show any potential. So therefore, for everyone to still be here means something. Izuku remarked. Go get changed, then back to class as quickly as possible, Aizawa said before walking off. Raiki unlatched from his hand and chased after him. They watched as she said something, making him smirk before she wrapped her arms around him and hugging him tight, which really confused the group, more so when he returned it. Izuku grinned as she raced back to him, and they left without a word, arms swinging between them with pinkies entwined. Both changed as quickly as possible, grabbed their things, and went back to the classroom. They were the first ones back, so just sat at their desks. Did you see their faces when I hugged Dad? Raiki chuckled. I sure did. It was a shame I didn't have my phone. I'd have taken a photo. Question though. What? Why did you let Bakugo hold your hand, but not Kaminari? You saw that, huh? Clearly, otherwise I wouldn't have asked. Honestly, Aizu, I have no idea. But I really want to hold his hand again. She muttered before slamming her forehead onto the desk. He chuckled as he rubbed her back affectionately. I think I know what's wrong. What? She turned her head to look at him. You have a crush. What? She roared, bolting upright, and he burst out laughing at her expression. You have a crush on Bakugo. And honestly, Raiki, I can actually see you two being together. And that's me being straight up with you. He's the only one I know of that can, or could tolerate your irritating arse like I can. Off. She grumbled as the classroom door opened, and everyone trailed in. Here comes lover boy. He whispered, and she shot him a dirty look, which just made him smirk. No one else here? Kirishima asked, as he dropped into his chair, rubbing his shoulder. No, just us. Raiki muttered, before stretching her arms out, then laying her head down on the desk, facing Izuku. Her hands flopped over the edge of the desk, covered in her black gloves. If that's the case, how about we get to know each other a bit better? Considering we're going to be around each other a lot for the next however many years, Karo. A frog-type girl asked. I like that idea, Kaminari said, straightening from his slouch position. I'll go first if you want by saying my name, quirk, and some hobbies. Pinky asked, and Izuku turned in his seat a little bit so that he could see everyone. This was where his photographic memory would come in handy. Go for it, Kirishima said. Okay, so the name's Mina Ishido. Feel free to call me either Mina or Ash. The quirk is acid. I love to have fun. Hobbies include dancing, hitting the arcade, and pranks. Bonjour, I am Yuga Aoyama. My quirk is the magnificent navel laser. Hobbies are being stylish, looking stylish, and being fabulous. A blonde lad said with a dramatic hair toss. And that was how it went around the room, until it got to Bakugo, who was before him, and Raiki. The name's Katsuki Bakugo. My quirk is explosion. I like kicking arse, which is also a hobby of mine. Don't get in my way, extras. Raiki looked at him as he said that, and while others grumbled at how rude he was, she just crooked her finger at him, motioning him to get closer. Izuku smirked internally as he knew what she was going to do. She loved a good challenge. When Bakugo didn't move quick enough, she reached out, grabbed his shirt, and yanked him to her, making everyone else gasp in fear of how he would retaliate. She leaned up until her mouth was level with his ear. Izuku, however, had full view of his reaction, which made him laugh internally as his eyes were wide with evident shock on his features. Izuku guessed he wasn't used to be manhandled by someone like Raiki, or perhaps anyone for that matter. Here's the thing. I'll get in your way any demon way I please. And you had better like it, Katsuki Bakugo, because if not, I'll blow you up myself. She purred into his ear before pushing him away. He stared at her with wide eyes as she didn't break eye contact with him. Izuku just rolled his eyes. If Raiki really laid on the charm, he'd have no chance in hell. The class waited with bated breath for his reaction, as well as no doubt wondering what she said to him. I look forward to it, Raiki-san. Bakugo smirked at her. Drop the san SHD. It's annoying as dash. She grumbled, and everyone let out a relieved sigh. Your turn to tell us a little about yourself. Mina said, drawing their gaze just as Aizawa walked in. Name's Reiki. Quirk is Mother Dragon. Hobbies include fighting, weaponry, music, enjoying spicy food, spending time with Izuku, as well as hanging out or training with one hero, my dad, she stated, huffing as she laid her head down on her arms again. Name's Izuku. Quirk is Kitsune, the nine-tailed fox. Hobbies include mastering weaponry, training, music, cooking, and spending time with Reiki and my mom, Izuku replied, before they turned their attention to Aizawa. They weren't going to include their other quirks, not yet anyway. So, what does that mean you're all caught up now? He sarcastically retorted, but Izuku could tell he was happy hearing what Reiki said about him. Almost, Mina called out. Why almost? Can Izuku and Reiki explain more of their quirks? And what you mean by one spends time with their dad and the other mom? Mina queried. How'd he know that was going to be asked? Izuku sighed. Because me and Reiki are not actually related by BLD. We are in fact best friends, but you might as well class us as siblings because of how close we are, and we always call each other brother and sister. So that's what we mean by that. And we're not going to explain our quirks, because it's just easier to show than explain all the ins and outs. Oh, okay. Everyone looked slightly disappointed at that, but Izuku didn't care. And by the looks of it, Reiki didn't give a toss either. Who was he kidding? Of course she didn't. This was Reiki after all. Bakugo finally stopped staring at her and turned around properly, which made them smirk at each other. Okay, now you've got your answer, let's begin. And with that, Aizawa began a lesson. Thank you for joining us on this journey through What If Deku Was Elemental Kitsune Syrinx. We hope you found it as captivating as we did. A big thank you to TazzDavies for creating such an engaging story. Don't forget to visit their profile on Wattpad for more fantastic works. The link is in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to Zen and Fanfics for more intriguing explorations into fanfiction and fantasy. Your support helps us create more content like this, and we love hearing your thoughts and suggestions in the comment section. See you soon in the next video.